Good morning. How's everybody doing? Start with you. Just kidding. What you see before you this morning are two generations of leadership in business, politics, and philanthropy. But I urge you to resist the urge to think of them as the last generation and the next generation, because as you're going to see, they're both quite active simultaneously. What we want to explore here today is the perspective that each generation brings to moving Detroit forward. Now, anyone who has kids has had this conversation. I'll look at my daughters with great wisdom, and I'll say, you don't know what you don't know. They'll look back with wide-eyed naivete and say, you're not the boss of me. Actually, they'll say, I may not know what I don't know, but I don't get stuck in doing the same things the same ways because that's all I know, which explains this haircut my daughter talked me into.
It looks great.
Thank you very much. So with this in mind, we're going to start with the younger generation first among us. As the stewards, what did you say when you talked to your parents? What would you like to say to your parent as the stewards of the world that you would someday inherit that you wish they had done differently? Now, I'll start with Katy.
Right in the center, and you start with me. I don't know. I mean, obviously, my mom has been kind of an integral part of Detroit's political history, and she's always kind of imparted those core values onto me. But I guess the one thing I think I would have hoped she had done differently is maybe not go into public service, maybe make a little money. But you know,
Didn't happen.
No, I didn't even have a shot. But no, that. Honestly, she continues to be an inspiration for me. You know, she's a little bit more uptight, I think, than I am. Sometimes I tell her to just loosen up a little bit. But other than that, I mean, you know, honestly, she's, like I said, she continues to inspire me in terms of the legacy that I think she's left, certainly in Detroit's political history.
I was going to ask the same question of JR, and I'm afraid I'm of the answer. You and your father wearing the same tie.
Yeah. It's always coordinated. We're very close. But this was a tough question, and you know, even though I've been thinking about it for the last hour, the risk that my father took 20 years ago, getting himself involved in New Detroit and the race relations in the city, I think personally I couldn't have done that at that time and taken that approach. You know, at the time, it was the risk, and you don't know how you're perceived. But looking back and moving forward, it's something that our family feels strongly about, something that I'm following in his footsteps, and something that I'm very proud that he did.
Denny?
I guess the only thing that I would suggest to you that I would have encourage him to do differently or maybe less is just, you know, I don't want to just say work, but, you know, I think that both, you know, my brother and I and my mother, you know, a lot of times even now look at him and say, why don't you slow the hell down? I mean, you've had a STEAM career, you've busted your butt for a very long time. You don't need to continue to do what you're doing at the pace you're doing, but you continue to do so. But the flip side of that being maybe the one thing that I would suggest would be different. I think it has set a phenomenal role model, not just for my brother and I, but just for the younger generation in general, as it pertains to someone like you discussed, Stephen, who has spent a good deal of his life trying to excel and help others professionally, civically, and philanthropically. And I think that trend is carrying through to a lot of the younger generation, I think including the three of us up here, because everyone is involved in their career, but each of the three of us are very involved in the community in our own different ways. And I think that's a trend that you're going to begin to see more and more, particularly, you know, Katy's a little bit younger than me. Her generation is very involved, and even ahead of their career pursuits, they're getting involved philanthropically.
We'll dig into that in a second. When you said that, I was thinking that's one of the things I tell my daughters all the time is your generation just doesn't know how to work like my generation does. I mean, I started young, worked hard, lots of hours. Mr. Mayor, I'll let you respond. First of all, do the kids today, and the general question is, What are the kids today doing that you're looking at and saying, no, that's not how you do it? You wish they would approach things differently. Is it that work ethic? Do you think that there's that, it may be a different kind of work ethic, but is it the same? Is it different? Is it better? Is it worse?
Well, an apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And if he thinks I work hard and I'm always gone, he's worse than I've ever been in terms of the devotion that he has for his business, the manner in which he does such a great job with our 2 grandchildren and goes to all their games and like he's always gone. I will make this observation. I have nothing to criticize our young people about. When I'm saying young people like Denny, Katy, and John, those who have had the benefit of having parents, whether single parents or a 2-parent household, because the young people I see today are really energized. I know when I became mayor, Denny and a whole bunch of young people decided, let's start getting people to come back to the city of Detroit. They created a group called Ambassadors. Probably that's where the magazine name came from. But they were always involved, always trying to do something, always trying to give back, because you parents have set such a good role model in terms of giving back beyond what you do. And we've been blessed by it. We need to support our young people and give them the encouragement to go farther beyond than what we have. So I'm very optimistic, and I'm very pleased at what I see.
Now, Sheila, your daughter left home, went away, and came back. I mean, so was going away the right decision for her? Was coming back the right decision for her?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and my preference would have been that she'd never left, but be that as it may, her decision, I think in part was wanting to be able to spread her own wings and and make her own mark, find her own voice, her own vision, other than being, you know, the daughter of Ken Cockrel Sr., who passed many years ago, and myself, and the sister of Ken Cockrel Jr. So I think that was an important reason for her to want to step away. When she came back, I mean, it never crossed my mind that she would end up living anywhere but in the city as a lifelong Detroit resident. But she's one of the messages I would have is that we have to know the history, not to repeat it. And so one of my urging to young people, and I do a lot of this, is let's put the history of the city or the circumstance you're in today in its historical context. So that would be my sort of initial caution. It's all wonderful, all this great new energy in the city, it's fabulous, but A, you're not the first generation to feel that way. I'm a child of the 60s, and that's what we thought we were doing. And B, you gotta know the history so that you can appropriately respond to what's going on.
Now, John, your son also left home, and we were talking earlier, and you essentially had to offer him a job to come back, and you had to beat other offers.
That's exactly right. We have always had the value in our family that there is no nepotism to begin with. And of my 4 children, I never forced any of them to want to get into the business, particularly that I'm in. It's a tough, hard-hitting business. Fortunately, JR, early on in his life, wanted to become a Walbridge employee. And so we together crafted a strategy, if you will, a career path that took him away from home. He went out east to high school, he went to Purdue University, then to NYU for a graduate degree. And then we insisted that he stay away and work a while to see what the real world really was like. One thing about family businesses that I'm sort of convinced about is that there isn't anybody in your company that will treat your children as if they were really employees. I don't care how much you cajole them to say, look, you got to treat my kid like everybody else. The reality is that they won't and they can't. The political pressures and my kids are extraordinarily smart and to some degree manipulative. And so, I'm an object of that manipulation, but I like it. We always insisted that he go away and, as Sheila said, find your own voice, get your own foundation, make sure that this is what you want, because at the end of the day, if you're going to take the mantle of your family, it has to be a passion for you. You can't do it and do it well if you're forced to do it. It has to be, you want to do it willingly, and it has to be part of you. And therefore, it's no longer work. it becomes your life avocation.
I want a topic here that I want to open up to all of you guys to discuss with each other also as we go along. How do we create a Detroit using our various different strategies, young or old, that makes the young people want to be here, to stay here, to become a part of it? What is it we should be doing, or maybe we are doing, to make that happen? So anybody want to weigh in on that first here?
I think we ought to start by supporting what's being done presently. I mean, the work that Dan Lepp has done in terms of bringing some 4,000 new employees down to downtown Detroit, what Dan Gilbert has done in bringing now almost 7,200 or so employees downtown. You cannot go in downtown Detroit today and find a loft, an apartment, a condo to buy, because it's all sold. You cannot go in downtown Detroit today and go to a garage and try to lease a space. It's all gone. When you look around, people getting off buses or coming to work, you see young people all over the place, backpacks, jeans, etc. You hear them on the elevator. They're excited about what they're doing. That's the kind of energy that we need to build upon, and I'm very grateful to all of the other businesses that have decided to come to downtown Detroit that's making a difference. Now we need to find a way to expand that into the neighborhoods and the like, and I think once we do that, the capstone is there, and I appreciate the volunteerism that I see working first with Robert Bob and now Roy Roberts with the Detroit Board of Education as emergency financial managers, who are trying to change the educational opportunities for our children in the city of Detroit. Those combinations, we need to support what others are doing. It's not what I do, it's what others are doing that we all collectively work together. Carol Goss and Tanya Allen with the Skillman Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, they're really doing a lot of great things. We need to support them and help them in what they're doing.
Now, Katy, I saw you nodding on that when you said, especially, giving the young people a reason to come back, creating that atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are some really basic things. I lived in both Chicago and New York, and there were some things that I just felt were really fundamental that we're already working on, that Mayor Archer kind of alluded to. Mass transit with M1 rail as a start, this influx of new young professionals that are moving in some respects to live, even if not to live, but just to work, investing hours per day. Downtown, our office is downtown, in downtown Detroit, and I've never seen it. I moved back in April of '09, from 09 until now, it's really kind of the energy is very different. One of the other things, though, that I think we need to really focus on is while we do have this kind of growing influx of folks that are living and working in the city, is getting them engaged in the political process. You've got a longtime friend of mine, I'm a publicist, so bear with me, I'm going to shameless plug really quickly, but a friend of mine just launched an initiative called Vote Detroit that's really designed to capitalize on this time where we've got a number of people moving in, but these folks aren't necessarily registering to vote in the city. And while there's a ton of kind of grassroots energy, you've got at the corporate level, Dan Gilbert, Dan Lepp, again, which Mayor Archer alluded to, but you've also got this grassroots small business, kind of growing small businesses kind of in and around the city. And I think we need to ensure that those people their voices are heard at the ballot box as well, because until there's infrastructural change at the local kind of municipal level, we're not necessarily going to see real change. So I would say that that's one thing that I think we need to.
JR, you brought something up when we were talking a little earlier, that life for a young person in New York and Chicago, LA, one of the big cities that we think about, typically can be really good, but only if you're making some pretty good money. What's the difference of trying to live in a city like that? And that's the one everybody says, wow, to be in New York. Or is it better to be a young person in a city like Detroit?
I think it starts with where you define young. Of course, growing up.
Well, about 57.
growing up in your 20s, it was convenient to bunk up with your friends and colleagues, share an apartment with 4 people in New York or Chicago, where you're, of course, priced out of the market. But Detroit, the value that it brings, not only in a monetary sense, but in a community sense, I think it's turned the corner. And it starts with the job creation and bringing those young professionals downtown to live. And hopefully, to the point that the mayor brought up, it's got to expand out to the neighborhoods. And that starts with education, because a lot of families really aren't looking to come down and educate their kids right now, as is in the Detroit public school system. But I think it's turning the corner, and as long as we can support the Central Business District, we're watching it flourish right now, of course, with Dan Gilbert and the many others who have brought jobs down there. That needs to transition into the neighborhoods to make it a true 24-hour city where both a single and a family would want to come down and stake their claim.
John.
So we're talking about the attributes and the aspects of what makes the city attractive. But I think this question begs a far deeper look, and that would be into what are the values that we're instilling, I should say, into our younger people. And it really starts at home and within the family. And that's one thing that we as a family always really strongly believed in, that we're the stewards of a company that was founded long before us, 1916. It's going to celebrate its 100th year anniversary. It's been in Detroit that entire time except for 9 short years where we went to Livonia. And over time, this company and our family has established a set of values that we've tried to install in our children. And those values say something along the lines that we don't own Walbridge Aldinger Company. We are stewards of Walbridge Aldinger Company, and it is really owned by a group of stakeholders, not just the shareholders. Are the shareholders the legal owners? That's true, but this company will only thrive and survive if, in fact, that it takes care of all the stakeholders that depend on the company. And that would be the employees, the supply base, our customers, of course the shareholders. But then we added 2 more. One was the community. We have to be stewards of the community also. And then the final one was the environment, which we just added about 10 years ago. And instilling these values, that concept that this is just not for us, but it's for everybody, really creates the kind of young people who can carry those values. And there are more values than that, but that seems to be the one I'm talking about right now. I'm most on my mind. But that values are so important today, because this is hard lifting at times, and you have to fall back on your values when things don't necessarily go your way. And
that's how you look at a company. You can look at a city the same way, and I was going to ask Denny about this, and we were talking about philanthropy, for instance. In the old days, philanthropy was round up the usual suspects, which are the companies that generally give to something. You round them up, and you get your donations, and you move forward. I see that changing personally. I see the kids, the young people who are moving here don't have any money at all, but they're jumping into every cause that comes along saying, I can help.
I think that's definitely generational. When we were chatting the other day, I had mentioned, Katy actually brought to my attention a young lady in, I believe, early 20s who had an idea to come up with a coat that converted into sleeping bags. And as much money as she can raise, she has artisans in Corktown that make these sleeping bags, and they go distribute them to the homeless. Now, this is a very bright young woman who could be going 100 miles an hour pursuing her career, but finds it more fulfilling and important to be doing something for the community. And I see, even in the age gap between Katy and myself, which is, I don't know, 15, 16 years, her peers, they are all civically involved to one extent or another. I know with, I'm 44, excuse me, and with my generation, my peers, there are some that are civically involved. Most do something if it's nothing more than contribute. But I would say that almost 100% of, unless you just have a stellar group of friends, but 100% of the folks that Katy runs around with, they're all involved to one extent or another, and they're very passionate about those things that they're involved in. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes out, and people do come out to support that. I mean, you look at Phil Cooley, and he's a successful entrepreneur, but Phil also has Pony Ride, which is a phenomenal philanthropic venture. And so I think you'll see that evolve more and more. And what it also helps, and Phil's a good example, is that the focus a lot of times, and understandably so, is on downtown. Mm. I mean, for a city to get back, somebody asked a question on a previous panel, what year do we think that the city is really going to be in the shape that we want it to be in. To get there, you have to have a thriving downtown. But I think a few people have mentioned it, Dad mentioned it, and JR mentioned it, is that, and it really has to go out into the neighborhoods, and these civic-minded kids, if you will, they are doing things in different neighborhoods. And if you can find people who are, to John's point, stewards of just a region of Detroit. I mean, downtown, I think, has set itself on a path now where it's going to be a phenomenal downtown. Corktown has someone over there who's paying it attention. Sue Mosey is doing some things in Midtown. Right. But there are a lot of other neighborhoods. You know, there's Rosedale Park, there's East Village. There are other neighborhoods that could use that sort of love. And so if you take younger entrepreneurs, if you partner them with young, philanthropically minded people, and you start to have pockets, at some point the goal is for that to connect, right?
So the question I want to ask, and I was going to ask this of you, Sheila, then, and maybe you can also speak for both political and business leaders, how do we tap into that?
Well, I think a lot of it is going on now. I mean, the work that Kirk Mays is doing in the Brightmoor community, I mean, it is a different model, and it's a very important development because it can't just be downtown in the neighborhoods. You cannot leave the majority population of the city of Detroit behind in this reinvention, and I don't think anybody wants to. This is an inflection point, but we have to deal with the fact that the tax base of the city, 14% is all that's in the general fund, is from property taxes. That has got to change. That means jobs have to be created for people who are in the city already. That's a different challenge. People like Kirk Mays and other organizations are working very hard to address that. But it has to be, and there's somebody's got a theme out here, One Detroit, that's absolutely the case. There has to be a Detroit that contains the folks who've been here, historically, the folks who have come home, and the new folks coming in. That's what's going to make this city, whether it's 2020 as Channel 7 would like, or 2030, which may be more realistic, that's the only way the city's going to come all the way back.
Now, John, your company was here during some pretty dark times and stayed through some pretty bad times, and you've been here through the renaissance that we're all witnessing. How do you tap into that younger generation of people who want to give, not just to be profitable to the company, but you say stewardship is a pillar of your company. How do you tap into that as a business owner?
I think that society in many respects is maturing, and where we used to depend upon large philanthropic gifts from a smaller number of families and corporations. Today you see this idea of helping transcending across all of society, and we're now talking about it within younger people. So what do younger people want today in order to locate into a city like Detroit? So when we came down here, we thought this was going to be a very big problem, but we found out that it's not, and I think for the following reasons. Number one, there is a urbanization happening of America where people want to come downtown and be involved in the cultural, sports, business activities of a central business district. Transportation costs are going to continue to, I just got back from Italy, premium gasoline is $12 a gallon. Can you imagine what would happen to our country if gasoline ever ended up at $12 a gallon?
We'd have to walk.
Everybody be moving back downtown or into some area that they could have mass transportation. You can't spend 25% of your income filling up your car. So there are these changes in society that are making places like New York, this is what our future is going to be. Detroit will end up becoming a great city again. I actually believe it's a great city today. And why do I say that? Detroit's an industrial town. We've always had to earn our stripes. Detroit is a hardworking, talented group of people, both the suburbs and the city itself. In many respects, Detroit is relentless, and you see all these ads today, outsource from Detroit, import Detroit. What they're really tapping into is the grit and the hard work that our city has always been noted for. And I can say this because we're in a unique position. We compete globally. We bid our work, and so we're in Brazil and Mexico and the Middle East. And those clients ask us for a price every day, so we're competing against the Italians and the Russians and the Chinese and the Japanese. And our people are the hardest working, most competitive people in the entire world. And it's something that we need to be proud of. And so when you take this entire culture and you put it together, I don't think it's a hard sell. I think we're too hard on ourselves saying, what do we have to do to attract all these young people? Look, we've got 3 of them up here who voluntarily, there's not one family here that said, you have to stay. There isn't. I mean, everyone has talked about that. And so we have all the pieces, all the dynamics in place. We just have to be more positive about ourselves. We're too negative. We're looking at ourselves through too dark a lens right now. We have an incredible future.
Mr. Mayor?
To John's point, when there was an analysis that was done by Detroit Renaissance that led to the Detroit Regional Chamber and Detroit Renaissance asking Etzel Ford to be the champion for One Detroit, one of the groups, the convention group, led by Larry Alexander, and at the time I think it was Chris Illich who was the chair, they did a survey and a poll and an analysis, and they found that we are our own worst enemy. We talk more about ourselves in a negative manner than anybody else, and then we look at the media and say, why do you all talk about it so badly? Because we feed it into them as opposed to our talking about the positive things that are going on. One of the things that I think we don't appreciate enough, or at least talk about enough, is what our foundation community is doing for the city of Detroit and this region. When you consider that M1 Rail is coming alive thanks to some outstanding businessmen who have invested and committed their capital, Rip Rapson at the Kellogg Foundation is playing a major role. But then they're doing other kinds of things to involve the entire community. And then you've got the Skillman Foundation, who helps with education. And then you look at the Southeastern Community Foundation of Southeastern Michigan with Miriam Nolan and what you're doing. You're seeing all kinds of things happening in our communities. And what Katy and Denny and JR are looking at, I think, along with their peers, is here's an opportunity for me to roll up my sleeves and get involved to make a difference. And that's where the ideas come to pass. You mentioned about Katy's friend turning a coat into a sleeping blanket. It is, people care. And just one point, we got the dean of the Michigan State School of Law who was at this conference. If you talk to her about the young people who are going to law school, she will tell you that as a result of the clinical programs, you talk to any dean, any law school, anywhere. Young people coming out of law school today, ask Hank. Hank will tell you the same thing. Young people coming out of law school today want to give back. They want to know, can I do pro bono work and still get credit? They want to participate in their community. That's what young people are doing, and they're doing that because all of you, frankly, have been helpful in charting a course and making suggestions and making a difference. When you consider what's going on at UD Mercy and what the new president's doing there, there's a lot of exciting things that's going on.
Now, the 11 years I've lived in this area, I've been working under the assumption, because I was told this is the way it was 11 years ago, is young people are leaving Michigan, they don't want to come back. Is that changing, JR, do you think? Besides you and Katy, obviously, who did come back?
I think, of course, it was a question of young people leaving due to the ability to get a job.
Yeah, lack of
in the state
opportunity.
Michigan, of course, but with the manufacturing coming back, and of course all the service industry jobs that have moved into Detroit and the surrounding suburbs, I don't think it's so much a question of am I able to find a job. It's now a question of am I going to be able to find the job I want. Mm-hmm. So the brain drain, if you want to call it that, I think happens at some levels. It's of course what an individual wants to pursue. But ultimately what happens is if you're not ultra successful in an area like New York or Chicago or Los Angeles, your lifestyle, I see a lot of people move back to Michigan because at the end of the day, it has the most value to offer anyone in regards to having your family here, and then of course the cost of living. So I think, again, there's just tremendous value living here. We bring retailers in from throughout the country, and they have no idea. Once they step into southeastern Michigan, it blows their minds. You know, they've read in the newspaper that we're basically the modern day Baghdad. And
well, that's what it goes back to what Ms. Archer said, is that, you know, we've got this people, we're our worst enemy. We do a really bad job of talking ourselves up beyond our own borders.
yeah, so once you get boots on the ground in southeastern Michigan, I don't think there's any other place like it in the United States.
We have about 10 minutes. I want to go down the line, and I'll start with you, John, since I just finished with JR. What is it, because we like a call to action here, what is it the people in this room can all put their brains together on to do to really make this the kind of place that a guy like you, when you were your son's age, would want to stay here? What makes it be the place that you want him to stay here in the future?
I think I'd start out by saying the opportunities are limitless. We have so much ingenuity, entrepreneurism that's going on, that anybody in the country that wants to come and plant their seed here will have an incredible opportunity to grow their company. Secondly, I think as a society, 4 or 5 years ago I talked about cohesion. This year my buzzwords are be for something instead of being against something. We as a group of business leaders and then spreading out into the broader community have to be for something. And I'm taking a new tack when I'm saying, tell me what you would do. Tell me what you are for. Don't tell me you're against this. That would be the first thing I would do. Second thing, there are 3 million unfilled jobs in the United States of America right now. 3 million, because we don't have the skills to fill them. We should be, as a society, as a community, looking at those jobs and saying, what 300,000 of those jobs do we want? And we need to build a society that will attract those 300,000 jobs. Can you imagine they're there for the filling today. What is it that's preventing us from offering, getting those people to come here and fill those kind of jobs? It's just incredible. And so this optimism that we all have it. I mean, when you get called up on stage here, you know, you can come up here and you can complain about what it was in the past, or you can look in the future and say, how can I make a difference? And that's the value that I think we all have. That's the value that's in most of the business community. Most politicians believe that way, but we need to start to be more optimistic and to say, do something.
Katy, what would you urge this room that they have the power to do right now that makes this the city that we all want?
I think it's just, you know, to continue to invest, and I don't mean that necessarily in the financial sense, invest, you know, in terms of time, resources, just to continue to create opportunities, whether that be to kind of roll your sleeves up. Like Dennis said, I'm not going to cite the oft overused kind of blank slate, you know, description, but I do think that it's becoming a more attractive place, in part because it is kind of, Detroit is seen as an opportunity to kind of roll your sleeves up and get right in. And so I think if we continue to create opportunities for folks to do that, and of course, you know, job opportunities, places to live, retail investment, just invest, continue to invest.
I think the culture of innovation that has really, you know, come to life in the city needs to be supported. There's pockets of it all over the place, young entrepreneurs trying all kinds of things, all this technology stuff, which is so far out of my realm of experience, I don't even get it, but they're doing wonderful, wonderful things. That needs to be supported. And on a political note, I think, you know, Katy mentioned the Vote Detroit campaign. This is an issue that I think business people can weigh in on. Something has to be done about the insurance rates that get charged in cities like Detroit. There's lots of reasons for it, but at the end of the day, it has a dampening effect on the democratic process. For a lot of young people, it doesn't make sense to register to vote in the city and you pay a poll tax. You have to pay an insurance. I've been paying it, but I've been here forever. You can't do that for a lot of young folks. So addressing the insurance issues legislatively and from a business perspective, I think would help ensure an even wider range of democratic participation in the political process in the city. That's how you create change.
Yeah, Stephen, I would suggest that the folks in the room, whether you're here representing a business or a nonprofit organization or some area of government, I would encourage everyone to really support and encourage creativity among the young people in your organizations. I think a lot of times people get a new job, they put their head down, and they do what is in front of them every day. But there's a lot that's inside of their head that could be very valuable to not just the organization, but to the community. And I think if you encourage that sort of openness as relates to the young folks in your organizations, I think you'll be surprised with some of the knowledge that they share and the ability to leverage that knowledge to help, pursue whatever the goal is in your particular entity.
Now, I'm not going to go to you yet because I made you a promise. You said, don't go to me first just because my name is Archer. I'm going to go to you last because your name is Archer. JR, what would you suggest it is that these people in this room, as business owners, as community leaders, can do to make this the kind of place that you and your generation really want to make home?
Well, I think the time is now that, of course, everyone's heard from the panel that Detroit has turned the corner, that there's a lot of optimism and a lot of confidence that Detroit is on the way back. And I think taking that message to your community, if you're not from Detroit, if you're from the suburbs, if you're from the west side of the state, and changing your view on the future of Detroit and being part of the growth that's going to happen. And I think a positive message, exactly what my father said, standing for something and supporting Detroit and explaining that, look, this place is actually going to make it, as opposed to let's just turn the lights out, I think is the most important. I think it's all attitude from here on out.
Mr. Mayor, playing off of that, and also part of the conversation we had yesterday, is you said it's important to make sure that people understand Detroit this isn't the only place on earth this is going on. That there are a lot of cities and states that are facing huge challenges, some much larger than this. Just for some reason, it's our turn in the barrel, I think is the way you put it. Can you expound on that?
Stephen, the reality is that for those who have time to read the newspapers in the business section, we only need to look, for example, to the state of Illinois, where the governor there has been trying to encourage the legislature to tackle and to deal with their huge deficit that they have and legacy issues of pensions and other issues as it relates to state employees. We're very fortunate in Michigan that we don't have the problem on the state level. Ours seem to be focused on the municipal side. But I would take you back, for example, to Illinois. And for those of you who have an opportunity to go to Chicago, there's a great city. There's a lot of creativity that goes on. I had a chance to work with Mayor Daley, and I had a chance to work with now Mayor Emanuel, who was in the White House, the Clinton-Gore White House, when I first met him. And I think if you talk to him, he'll tell you that he's got the exact same problems and even worse than the city of Detroit. So there's a lot of cities across the United States that have the same challenges as we do. But we are now, you don't dwell on the past, but to give you an example of the past, however, please remember that when Sheila and I were in office at the same time, we built and adopted and caused 3 casinos to come into the city of Detroit. And not one person was indicted or charged with anything because of an ethics policy that Sheila championed and put in place. And so we do have the past of what occurred. We've all watched the trial that's gone on. We know that there's going to be a sentencing coming up at some point soon. But we also know that there's a deficit that's out there, but it can't be resolved. We also know that because there wasn't a relationship that allowed a consent agreement, which was desired to see if we could avoid emergency financial manager from being appointed. It didn't work, so now it's here. It doesn't, in my view, have to go to bankruptcy. But if it does, this city's not going off the face of the earth. I want you to remember what we all inherited when you were kind enough to support my candidacy for mayor. We led the nation as having the highest percentage of people living below poverty, 32.2%. And when you factor that in for children, That meant 46.6% of our children living in Detroit live below poverty. Thanks to all of you, thanks to the businesses who believed in our city and invested, thanks to the empowerment zone from the Clinton-Gore administration, the Renaissance zones from Governor Engler, thanks to the investment by the foundation community. In 2000, the Census Department said that there were 15 other cities that had a higher level of poverty than we do. We led the nation for 3 years in a row, Site Selection Magazine, in terms of growing jobs and creating opportunity. This too will pass, but you gotta believe in yourself, and you can look in terms of what we've all gone through together. It's not me or any one of us here, it's all of us. The Chamber is doing a great job in terms of bringing us together, the businesses together, and they're promoting things that will help the city, that will help the region. The work that they're doing in bringing in new businesses, when they have these trade missions to go around the country to bring in new business, it gives everybody in business here, bankers and others, an opportunity to have a shot at them. We can deal with this and we can win it. I'm optimistic about the city of Detroit.
Absolutely.
I'm blessed with something that never happens in my business. I've got 2 minutes. Would anybody like to have a last word on this, or are we going to?
What's your thoughts, Stephen? You've heard the panel. You've watched the news. You've presented the news. People come to you. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
I come to this as a perspective as somebody who grew up outside of this city, and being a military kid, I grew up all over the country. So I've lived in some really great cities. I've lived in Denver, Colorado, which I consider a great city, New York, San Diego. I mean, even if the cities suck, the weather's great. But having seen that, I think the thing that struck me the most from day one was when I came here was how hard people try to distance themselves from the city.
Yes.
And it has just absolutely astounded me the number of people who believe we would be better off in the suburbs if the city were just to slip off into the river quietly. And how do we make people understand that just doesn't work? And that's the question, I guess, maybe somebody can answer that question. Why do we need a healthy Detroit?
Well, I think, if nothing else, the question that's raised around the DIA's collection ought to make it clear that there's a connection, a symbiotic linkage. I think that culture is changing. I think there are far fewer people who live in the suburbs who embrace that 60s, 70s sort of fleeing the city, get out of town, let Detroit will fix it all on its own. It made its own problems, let it fix it. People have abandoned that perspective. And you see the reinvestment in the city that's happening because people have said that doesn't make sense.
Also,
it's simply a moral imperative. That's why. That's where you start. You can build any kind of a case after you agree. It's a moral imperative.
I'll tell you what, something else building upon what Sheila said, as well as the moral imperative, as John just mentioned, is that we no longer see in the city of Detroit where state members of running for state legislature, whether state senate or the state house, used to get elected by who could say what they would do the least for the city of Detroit. They were against the city of Detroit. They weren't for it. Today, thanks to the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Detroit Chamber, working together collegially, we appreciate, and the business leaders that merged together from Detroit Renaissance and the business leaders in Grand Rapids, we appreciate how important Michigan happens to be. It's changing. That's why I'm so positive about our state as well as our cities.
Good. First in the alphabet, last word. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it.